What is colonial servitude, and how can we heal from it to reclaim our power, our agency, realize that we are not on earth to serve other people, that we are full human beings, that we can exercise our freedom, use our voices to raise concerns about issues that are troubling to us? How can we do that? This is what we're going to talk about in this live today. Welcome everyone who is rejoining. My name is Marissa Price. I am a liberation coach for Black Women and Femmes. I am a social worker, a healer by spiritual birthright. And yeah, I'm so glad you're here. As you're coming in, please introduce yourself in the comments so we can say hello. If you're watching the replay, let us know what you gained from this video. And if you are in a process of unlearning colonial servitude, tapping back into your power, right, your agency, we would love to see you in the comments. But welcome everyone who's joining. Again, my name is Marissa Price, a liberation coach for Black women and femmes on this journey of reclaiming our power from oppressive systems that have tried to rob it from us, that have tried to convince us that we're not powerful, to silence our voices. And the reason why all of these efforts are made to try to silence our voices is because they're so powerful. We bring such a power, such a knowing into these spaces where a lot of harm is being done. And so by calling these things out, a target is on our back, right? So how can we unlearn this whole thing of being in service to other people, dimming our light, shrinking ourselves, which is a product of colonization? How can we unlearn that to tap back into our authentic selves? That is the purpose of today's live. So yeah, please feel free to introduce yourselves. Say hey in the comments as you're coming in. But yeah, let's just start off with, what is colonial servitude? So it's this term, this like big term that seems kind of vague, right? And I actually learned this from Dr. Rocio Rosales Meza. She is an indigenous healer who I took a course with. And I linked her channel in the description section as well if you do want to subscribe to her channel. But hearing that term, right, and really sitting with it and realizing how often it has shown up in my own life, of me feeling like I am in service to other people. Even thinking about my experiences at a toxic job, right, being open to taking on additional tasks outside of my job responsibilities, feeling like I did not have the agency to say no, to push back against that, to say that's not okay with me, and really unpacking where that came from, how I was socialized to not say no when things were actually not okay with me. When I had that thing pop up within me, which a lot of us do, that we know it's not right, what we're experiencing, where does the socialization come in to tell us to not say anything when that voice pops up? A lot of the times it happens in childhood, right? We are in situations where we may have spoken up before. We may have been brave and bold. We know when we come here, we know exactly who we are. And being in these environments where who we are is not welcomed, it's not appreciated, people are actually afraid of the power that we hold, right? And that's one of the ways that colonization works too. Fear. It functions on fear. And so if we have tried to speak up before, and we had situations where people have downplayed what we have said, we have been ostracized, we have been bullied, we have been told that what we're saying is not, there's no merit to it, so we should just be silent, that is oppression. And so we learn to shrink ourselves, right? We learn that someone else is in power over us, which is colonial servitude, putting someone else above you, right? In power over you. And you feeling like you have no agency in that situation to speak up, to push back, to say, actually, that's not okay. That's not okay with me. Where do we learn the messaging that we can't do that? We can't utilize our voices because they're so powerful. So that is the topic of today's live. Like I said, please introduce yourselves. Say hey in the comments. I love to say hi to y'all. And thank y'all so much for watching and supporting my channel. I just reached 2,000 subscribers. So I am thankful, deeply thankful to everyone who watches, comments, likes, shares. my videos. It means a lot to me. And so expressing gratitude to you all for watching, being here. Just thank y'all. Okay, I do have, oh, hey, Tajay, Harmony. Please let me know if I'm not saying your name correctly. But hey, Marissa, yes, love what you bring to this space for fellow Black women like myself. Thank you. Thank you for that. And it's so good to see you here. I appreciate that comment. Akina says, Akina Harmon, hey, Marissa girl, hey. Yes, Akina and I were just in the same challenge, Get Your Next 3 Clients challenge with Stephanie Perry and Rashida Dow. So that was lovely. That was lovely. Hello and welcome. So I did look up some of the definitions of servitude to start us off. So some definitions I found. So servitude, the state of being a slave or completely subject to someone more powerful. Again, placing someone else, another fellow human being who doesn't know things, right? Who has flaws, faults, who often doesn't know what they're talking about when we're talking about being mediocre, which we know is often the case. But we're taught and socialized to view those people often as above us, as lording over us, as telling us what to do. We're seeking approval, we're seeking validation from these people who are nowhere near on our level. That is servitude. That is a product of colonization. To look up to the colonizer, the oppressor, as having all the answers, as being the one to validate what you're doing and saying, knowing that you came here on earth with everything inside you already. You knew what you were talking about, right? You have all, again, going back to tapping into our skill sets, you have all the skills. You have all the skills. You have everything within you already, but we're taught to seek that externally, to seek that stamp of approval. Always. Another definition of servitude, a condition in which one lacks liberty, especially to determine one's course of action or way of life. So lacking liberty. A lot of us are in the mind frame of reclaiming our freedom, which is an offering I have now. If you are interested in reclaiming your self-confidence, tapping back into your freedom, your authentic self, I'm now offering healing and liberation coaching sessions that you can sign up for. I will link it in the chat too, but it's scrolling here on the screen. Because right through this journey of healing from a toxic job experience, realizing that I had completely tapped out of my power. I had tapped out of my power. I had been socialized, again, combing through the roots of how I got in this situation and why I felt like I had to stay. I was socialized to not speak up, even though I have always had a very strong voice, which is the case for a lot of us. And I think it was because I had such a strong voice, right, that it made people around me fearful. It made people around me uneasy and uncomfortable because, again, I have always been a truth teller. I wrote about this on my Substack blog. I've always been a truth teller. And so me calling things out is just natural to me. But in environments that are hostile, that are toxic, that view you as a threat, that's where your self-confidence can really take a hit. If you are a truth teller, if you do call things out, if you see things being done that are not right and they don't sit well in your spirit, those people in that environment don't want you to know what's happening. So they're going to try everything in their power to break your self-confidence so that you think that you don't know what you're talking about anymore. When really it's the fact that you do know what you're talking about so strongly, then now the target's on your back. Yes. Hey, Ujo Waje. I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Please let me know. Greetings, everyone. Hey, welcome. Glad to see you here. Glad to see you here. Butterfly effect. It's interesting how we are socialized to give our power away. True tellers are the enemy in toxic structures, systems. Butterfly effect. That is a word. It's true. True tellers are the enemy in toxic structures, systems. Ooh, right? And some of us, a lot of us will internalize the treatment that we experience. People telling us, what you're saying doesn't have any merit. Like, why are you calling that out? We will internalize that, oh, I'm doing too much. I shouldn't have said that, right? I shouldn't have spoken up because now the target's on my back. Instead of externalizing what happened to you, which is a part of healing, externalize that blame. The person who did that to you is at fault. They're at fault. And that's another tool of colonization to kind of murky the waters, right? Make the waters murky when it comes to who's at fault, who's to blame for what we're seeing. That is a tool of colonization. And so unlearning that, right? Externalizing that shame that a lot of us have internalized, placing it on the people who harmed us, the bullies, the villains, the oppressors who have tried to strip us of our power, that's their fault. And we can reclaim our power from what they tried to do to us. Because clearly it didn't work. It didn't work. Because so many of us are still speaking our truth. We're still calling out injustices. So yes, absolutely. Butterfly Effect says you're speaking to me right now. Oh, thank you. Yes, and thank you for that comment. Ujo Waje says so true. Yeah. 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 I mean, thinking about the history of colonization, which is a global issue that impacts Black women all around the globe. Having been in circles assisting Black women with leaving, healing from toxic jobs, hearing how similar our stories are, right? It can be in the US, it can be on the continent of Africa, it can be in the UK, it can be in Germany, it can be in Brazil. We're encountering the same pattern of abuse in workplaces over and over again. Because colonization, white supremacy is global. And we're being harmed by the impacts of that. So how do we tap back into our power and say, you're not going to tell me that what I'm saying is incorrect. You do not hold power over me. That is a mind game that oppression plays on us. When we think about, I just did a podcast, the second episode of my On Freedom podcast, talking about what to the slave is the 4th of July. When it comes to seasoning, which is a term like in the Caribbean, before people who were enslaved were brought forcibly to the US, to the Americas, a lot of people were first forcibly brought to the Caribbean to have their minds literally broken. That was the goal of seasoning. So that you would be primed to enter into a plantation system where you are now looking up to your enslaver, to your oppressor, for directions on everything, for approval. It's actually breaking your spirit, your human spirit, because we all have free will. We all come here with free will and the ability to question what is happening to us. And throughout our lives, slowly, right, it's a process of slowly disintegrating that voice that we have that is so powerful that we have to tap back into to get free. Let's read some comments. Ty J Harmony says, I always say, I'll die on the hill of truth and integrity than to let others gaslighting me to believe something incorrect. Ooh. Ooh, that's powerful. That is powerful. Yep. Ooh, thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Yeah. And gaslighting is real, especially when you're a truth teller and you call out things and you bring awareness to issues that are happening. People love to gaslight you, right? Tell you that's not really that big of a deal. Like, why are you stressing? Why are you making this more than it is? Tapping back into what you know to be true and also surrounding yourself with other people who are truth tellers is so key, because it can be isolating. It can be very isolating. Yeah. Ikena Harmon says, curious, Marissa, how do we reconcile those feelings of self-shame and blame when our employers and colleagues are Black? Ooh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Again, I talked about this in my podcast, second episode on freedom, which is on my channel as well. You do not have to be white to carry out white supremacy. There are agents of white supremacy, right, that are carrying out the tactics, the tenets that we see. So I think viewing it like that has been very helpful for me, and even reconciling some of the experiences that I have had with other Black people too. And understanding that it takes an understanding. It takes interrogation of who you are and how you're operating in the world to understand how those teachings of white supremacy may be showing up in what you're doing, and to unlearn that and to go a different route. So I think healing from that shame and blame, that's going to be key right there. Again, externalizing that, and also realizing they're operating in a greater system of white supremacy, and they may be acting as agents, willingly or unknowingly. Yeah. I hope that was helpful. Thank you for that question. Tajay Harmony says, the attachment to allow harm and abuse to go unchecked and not be accountable is insane. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. And we are socialized. Even thinking about accountability. A lot of us, like, there's messaging around people who are harmed have to take accountability too. I personally disagree with that, right? Wholeheartedly. I think that if you are harmed in a situation, the blame goes on the person who harmed you. Full stop. Full stop. I don't think that we need to interrogate what we did, right? There's room to say, how can I don't even know if I agree with that as I'm saying that. Is there room to say that? Because there are predators out there. And so no matter what we do and how we operate, I guess to be prepared for the fact that there are predators, that could be helpful. But to say that you need to take accountability for the harm that was done to you, no, that doesn't sit well with me. That doesn't sit well with me. Yeah, thank you for that comment. Butterfly Effect says, I find that I start self-gaslighting at times. Yeah, the internalized oppression is real. Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, self-gaslighting. I think I did a video about that on my channel too. So telling yourself that what you're experiencing, what you're seeing with your senses, what you're picking up is not real. And this comes after someone externally has told you that what you're seeing, feeling, experiencing isn't real. So you start to question yourself. You start to become your own gaslighter, which is also how oppression works. You experience oppression externally in your environment, and then you begin to oppress yourself. Once it gets in your mind, which is why it's so important to begin healing and liberating our minds, understanding where this messaging comes from. We don't come here on earth gaslighting ourselves, oppressing ourselves, working ourselves past the point of exhaustion. None of us come here doing that. So that means it has to be something in our external environment that we've now internalized, and we're doing it to ourselves. So part of that healing is taking that off, realizing that was never yours to take on. You may have had to take it on out of survival, but you can also let it go. You have the power to do that. Yeah. Okay, another definition of servitude, the state of being under the control of someone else and of having no freedom. Again, a lot of us feel like we don't have control over our lives, that we have given up control to our oppressors, someone else to tell us what to do, how to function, how to move. We have free will. We come here having full autonomy and sovereignty over our bodies. And along the way, we're socialized to believe that that's not true. And we have to look to someone else above us who is in control, that we don't have the freedom to move. This is oppression at work, literally. right? This is colonization, a byproduct, telling us that we must yield to the colonizers. And it really gets into our minds, right? The psychology of oppression, which I'm going to be talking more about on my channel. How does the psychology of oppression tell us that we're not powerful? That they outnumber us? When we know that that's not true. We can look around and see that that's not true. It's the same things that happened on a plantation. It's a plantation system recreated. The system never died. It never went away. It recalibrated. So that's important to recognize as you're understanding what happened to you. How you can begin to reclaim who you are authentically. Tap back into your voice and your power. Realizing that all these messages are part of a system that is designed to keep you oppressed. Yeah. JSim7 says, hey, Marissa. Hey, chat. Hey, Marissa, I can tell you're healing because your voice is getting stronger. Thank you for that. Thank you. Woo. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry, but I really appreciate that. I really do. Yeah. And can I say one of the impacts of being in a toxic job? My voice went away. Like, not completely, but it was going through some things. And working with Coach Yolanda on YouTube. Coach Yolanda is her YouTube channel. Yeah, her sharing with me that may be the throat chakra that was blocked. For all that time I was in a toxic job, trying to speak up in an environment that said they wanted my voice, but not really. So now I'm tapping back into that. That's important to recognize. Parts of ourselves that we have lost temporarily along the way, we can go back and reclaim. We have the power to do that. So if your voice or other, like a physical side effect that you're experiencing from being in a toxic environment that tried to rob you of your power, you can go back and reclaim those parts of yourself. That's so important to recognize. Thank you for that. Thank you. Yeah. Jane Toussaint, hello. Says, great question, Akina. Yes, agreed. Agreed. Yeah. Akina says, thank you. Very helpful, Marissa. Okay. Healing from the shame, blame, and learning to operate differently. That's a word. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that was helpful. Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. That has been key for me in healing, externalizing, literally calling out the people who have harmed me, who lied to me, who brought me in to do a job that they were actually not being honest about. And me operating with honest intentions in an environment that was filled with lies. It's important to name that, to call that out, whether that's in your journal to yourself. As long as you're able to recognize that truth, that the blame rests with the external party, that's when you begin to break those shackles of the shame that you have internalized. Because it was never yours to carry. You survived a toxic environment. And you should celebrate yourself for that. You really should. Hey, Self-Care Central. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yes, yes. Okay. All right, so what is colonization? Just a definition. A process of establishing control over foreign territories or peoples for the purpose of exploitation and possibly settlement, setting up coloniality and often colonies commonly pursued and maintained by colonialism. So again, these words that we see keep popping up. Control over territory. How does this show up interpersonally? We're taught that now colonizers have control over our bodies, over our beings, over our minds. And we just must accept whatever they do. That we no longer have control or agency. The same thing that we see being done to the land when it comes to colonization. They assume control over indigenous lands, right? And just expect us to not speak up, not fight back. Because again, the psychology of oppression, the fear associated with that. So fear, violence is used to reinforce the messaging that they now have control over the land, over us, over what we think, over our dreams. That is the reinforcement through violence. How can we recognize that? Because the pattern is the same. The pattern is the same. So as we begin to recognize how they're operating, then we can start to take our power back. Because we know it's not us. This is the way that they operate. The mind control, self-care central, yes. Agreed, the mind control. Yeah. Yep. Control over land and territory goes to control over us and our minds and our bodies. It's the same way of operating. And that's important to recognize. Right? The teaching of colonization teaches us, right, that you are on earth solely to serve the needs of your colonizers. And that's why you're here. That doesn't sound right to me. I don't think that I went through the process of coming to earth in this body, on this planet, to serve the needs of colonizers, to serve the needs of fellow people, to tell me what to do. That doesn't sound like, I don't see free will in that anywhere. And free will is really the cornerstone of humanity. So they are denying our humanity when they tell us that we don't have agency and that we're just here to serve their needs, whatever those may be. And we should just be okay with it and shut our mouths. Who does that serve? That certainly doesn't serve us. That doesn't respect our agency or our free will, but that definitely serves their needs. Because now they have people to control. It reinforces their position, their power. Right? The teaching of colonization that you don't have freedom, that you're not able to speak out and fight back, that you should be okay with self-sacrifice. Because that's just what you're here to do, is sacrifice yourself, again, for the needs, for what the colonizer needs you to do. You should sacrifice yourself, your body, your mind, work extra hours, push yourself past the point of exhaustion, as long as their needs are being met. You're nowhere in that equation besides fulfilling a task, serving, being in service to people who you now view as above you, as a byproduct of colonization. Colonization teaches us that we are powerless to whatever they do, which we know is not the case. Throughout history, we have proven that to be incorrect over and over again. But another way that colonization works, oppression works, is to affect our memories, which is why it's important to go back to history, as I have been doing. Remind yourself, what is the truth? What actually happened? Because they're certainly not going to tell you the truth. You have to seek that and find that for yourself and stay rooted in that. As the ways of trying to get your memory, trying to attack your memory, really start to come into play. That is a real tactic of oppressors. Hey, Ashley. Good to see you. Good to see you here. Yes. Tajay Harmony says, this community that you have built on here is very special. Thank you. I'm happy that we can come together and find ways to protect ourselves and live healthy, happy lives. I agree. Thank you for that. Thank you. That's a beautiful comment. Thank you. Yeah. Prayer Warrior for Life says, yes, agree. This is a special and very important community and space for healing. I appreciate that. I really do. Yes. Yes. And also wanted to say, if y'all are interested in working with me one-on-one, I am offering liberation, healing sessions. Again, I am a master level social worker. I am trained, just tapping back into my skill set, right? As I am unlearning the things that I encountered in the work environment that I was in, tapping back into my skill set. I am a master level social worker, trained. I think I have over 900 hours of in-field service that I have gained, that I'm tapping back into to meet the needs of my community as we are healing, liberating ourselves from oppression, tapping back into our power, regaining our self-confidence, and tapping back into the power of our voices because they're so powerful. And that is where change comes from. Us calling out stuff that we see is not right. And again, going back to history, we have seen this over and over again. Over and over again throughout history. Right? Black women have consistently brought attention, brought awareness to, called out things that were wrong. And that is how things begin to change. And I take that very seriously, that I am operating in a legacy of this. And it's important to remind ourselves of that, so it doesn't feel so isolating. Because it can feel like that in toxic environments if you're the only one doing this. But reminding yourself that you're actually carrying out a legacy of advocacy, of truth telling, is so important to realize that you're never alone. You've never been alone. It's just that environment that makes you feel that way on purpose, because they don't want you to tell the truth. They don't. Oh, thank you for the hearts. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Colonization tells us that we can't move from toxic environments because it's scary out there. What about here? What about us being harmed here? Why are you telling me it's so scary out there if I leave? I'm being harmed here. Thinking about toxic jobs, our health is being impacted. Our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health is being impacted. So the lie that something does not exist out there that's better is a tool to keep us where we are, to maintain the status quo, to maintain us being in colonial servitude. We have to push back against that, right? And recognizing that that is a tool is so powerful. Just that awareness, that initial awareness, because a lot of us don't get to that point. Right? Deliberately, on purpose. People don't want us to get to that point. So if you are aware and you are operating in the understanding that you are so powerful, and so tactics will be deployed to try to steal your power from you at every turn, now you can recognize that it's not you. And you can understand the system that you're operating in. Yeah. What else does colonization teach us? That we have to cower and accept mistreatment. That colonizers are our creators. That they purposely try to control our destinies. That they outnumber us. They don't. That we don't have the power or even ability sometimes to advocate for ourselves and demand better. We have demonstrated this to be false over and over again. And even that voice inside us that may take some time to get out, you may need to just write it to yourself, right? But that voice inside you that's saying that this is not right, that you deserve better, heed that. Listen to that. That's special. Because we come here with those voices inside of us as kind of like a compass in life telling us. Yet all these messages are telling me that I need to stay here. That is what oppressors will tell you, because you're serving them. You are making their life easier. They depend on you. And so it's understanding that, coming back into that, your power, and realizing that you do have the ability to advocate for yourself and demand better at every turn. Colonization teaches us that we should be satisfied and grateful for living as second-class citizens without full rights. Right? Even reading that we should be grateful for living as second-class citizens. That we should be okay with not having full rights, full human rights. That is a tool of oppression. Why should we ever be satisfied with that? Why should we be grateful for that? We were not put on earth to be in service to human masters. We were put here with full agency. We were born to be free. We were born powerful, with the ability inside us to recognize when something isn't right. And over time, our voices may have been silenced because we were in toxic environments. We were around people who were carrying out systemic oppression, right? Whether intentionally or unknowingly, to strip us of our power because they recognized that we knew something wasn't right. But we were born with that power, and it's tapping back into that, which is a huge part of healing, getting back to who you were as a child. Oppressors, colonizers will try to convince us that children shouldn't be listened to, because children call out the truth. And I guarantee a lot of us as children called out the truth as a community of truth tellers. And it was just over time that we thought something was wrong with us. So we began to slowly mute our voices, silence what we saw happening around us that we knew wasn't right, to stay safe often as a means of survival. But now we can begin to tap back into that, shaking off those shackles, unlearning colonial servitude, that we have the power to push back. Because we're on Earth too. We came here for a reason too. We deserve to live free. You can still hear me. I think my Wi-Fi is going out. But how did this happen? So I have notes here on how this happened, how my theories, right? The education system. The people who oppress us, who do not view us as full human beings, are often in charge of our curriculum. From such formative years, right? The times when our brains are forming, where we develop most of our personalities, most of our understanding of the world, we are in education systems being educated by people who do not view us as fully human, who are putting forward the message that we should be okay with colonial servitude, that are literally priming us to not push back, to not speak up. If we think about the way that the classroom structure in the US is, one person that we look to for authority, the students are expected to be quiet, not push back, not raise a point of disagreement, but accept fully, without question, everything that the person at the front of the classroom is saying often. And not saying that every teacher operates like that, but that in general is the way that the US education system functions. So we're primed for this from such a young age. Also, constantly stripping our power that we come here with through abuse. One of the ways that colonization happens is abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, spiritual abuse, and understanding some of the ways that the brain functions and how it responds to abuse. We tend to go within, especially being socialized as women. We tend to go within thinking something's wrong with us, shrinking out of safety to survive. How do those same things show up? When now we're being called, that voice inside of us is telling us to advocate for ourselves. Now we don't trust our voice. That's huge. JSIM7 says, and when they do push back, they're oftentimes punished. Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, in classrooms, right? Just thinking about the experiences that I have had, seeing students offer a point, like respectfully, a point of, no, I don't think that's correct. And the vitriol that the teacher puts back on a student, and we already know there's an unequal power dynamic there, to basically not question what they're saying. Right, we're being primed for this. Oh, Leslyn. Oh my God, Marissa, I almost missed it. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. Good to see you. Always good to see you. Yeah. So the psychology of oppression. So our brains are impacted by being socialized to be colonial servants, to not think critically, to break our self-confidence and self-esteem when we do push back against what we know is not right. And like I said, I'll be doing more videos on the psychology, how oppression works, how it literally is a mind game, convincing us that we're not powerful. And we know that there are actually brain changes. And this is something I've been getting into studying enslavement. Being stripped away from your land, being sold from your family, having violence constantly reinforce this messaging that you know is not right, because something inside you won't let you accept that this is just life. How does our brain change throughout that? I don't think enough has been done to really understand the psychological impacts of enslavement and how that has carried on from generation to generation. Intergenerational trauma is so real. Epigenetics, that we carry the trauma of things that our ancestors experienced, and it's just passed down. Yeah. Yep. Leslin says the neural pathways restructure in response to these traumas. 100%. Yep. Yes, I have been looking at the physiological changes in the bodies in response. Yeah, me too. Me too. Yep. And like you said, the neural pathways. In response to trauma, your brain is literally changed. It's not the same brain that you had before you went through that traumatic experience. Yep. And when we think about something as massive as colonization, which is global, as enslavement happening over centuries, what has been the impact on our brains, and how are we seeing that play out today? That's real. That's real. Lesson says the thing is that punishment comes with very interesting ways to begin with. The classroom don't really look like a place of learning anymore, but indoctrination. Ooh, Leslin, yes, yes. Ooh, yeah. Thank you for that. Yep. I have been sitting with that too. How much was I learning and how much was I being indoctrinated? Ooh, that's real. That's real. Yep. Yeah. So like I said, intergenerational trauma, right? Epigenetics, trauma that is carried in our bodies, trauma that has never been resolved. Thinking about how colonial servitude happened and how it continues. Dissociation. So this is a trauma response. Again, to something traumatic happening in your environment and you cannot physically leave. Thinking, returning to enslavement. You are literally shackled to where you are. You can't leave. How many of our ancestors dissociated as a means of surviving? This is when your brain kind of like, you feel like you're floating above your body sometimes, that you're not really present. It's your brain's way of protecting itself in a very traumatic situation or environment. How often did this happen during enslavement? Again, when you could not move. And dissociation is often, we see it mentioned in childhood trauma. When children cannot leave traumatic environments, their brains will often dissociate. Adding to that, childhood trauma, adding to that, enslavement. What were children who were enslaved? What were they experiencing? What were their brains? How were they being changed? It's something to sit with. It's really something to sit with that we don't pay enough attention to, right? By design. Because if we did, the pieces start to connect. We see a lot of the things that we're experiencing today have roots in enslavement. Those things, those traumas were never resolved. Time passed, but they were never resolved. And so that trauma is passed down from generation to generation, and we're carrying that in our DNA. The pressure to be in service, to be colonial servants. We never had a chance to heal, to unpack what that experience was like and how that impacted children who became adults, who passed that on to their children, generation to generation. Yeah. Yeah. Just looking through the comments here. Lesson says, and I think that is why the aftermath of slavery here did not look very different. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Hey, Grace Hill. Good to see you. All praises. Mavis Kelly says, Marissa, this topic is so powerful. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And welcome. Good to see you, Mavis. Soul Inspired says, peace to everyone. Peace. Good to see you as well. Yeah. All right, some other notes I have on how did this happen? How does this happen? Colonial servitude, narcissistic abuse, the confusion of being uplifted and then devalued and disregarded, as is the case for Black Americans over and over again. Being uplifted and then being devalued. The constant back and forth of the narcissistic abuse cycle, right? Love bombing, devalue, discard. Back to love bombing. It's confusing and it actually impacts your brain as well. This is trauma. This is trauma. We're often trapped in a cycle of narcissistic abuse in the place that we live, by the place that we live. How is this impacting us? How is this telling us that we should be okay with being in colonial servitude? Bowing to people above us in power and not questioning what they're doing. knowing that their actions are impacting us. That means we have a say because we're being impacted by what they're doing. But how is that cycle of being uplifted and then being told you're worth nothing, your life doesn't matter, and then being uplifted again? That's confusing. That's very confusing. And it leaves a lot of us kind of without the, I don't think power is the right word, but the mental space often to really process what's happening to us. Because it feels like a whirlwind. It feels like things are moving too fast. One day I'm being sought out. One day I'm being told that I can't speak up. And so that impacts our ability to question what is happening, what we see happening. That I just have to be okay with seeing the earth being destroyed. That I can't speak up, that I don't have the power, that I don't have free will, that I don't have agency. For anyone who has been in a narcissistic relationship, right? Work, personal, familial, you know how much that impacts your self-esteem and your trust in your voice. Thinking about how that plays out on a systemic level. That's real. Yeah. Yeah, Lesson says in Black women, it's almost very often. Yes. Yeah. It is abusive, Lesson. Yeah. Yeah. Butterfly Effect says, yes, narcissistic abuse is so harmful within society and within family systems or intimate relationships. Yeah. I agree. I agree. And if we look at narcissistic abuse and just being able to connect it to what we see happening, right, in the context of the US to Black Americans, to other people who are oppressed as well, right? But just focusing on Black Americans here, as the descendants of people who were enslaved, the abuse, the brain changes from that abuse, and then you're in a country that constantly lifts you up for their own purposes, because we know that in narcissistic abuse, it's never genuine. It's always about the narcissist and how it makes them look. So lifting you up for their purposes and then devaluing you and discarding you when they no longer need you to make them look good. And then you're left questioning your voice and your power and your abilities because you think it's something you did. It's not. It's not. Butterfly Effect says similar to the pet to threat cycle as well. Absolutely. Yeah. And for those of you who are not familiar with pet to threat, this is a term coined by 3 Black women professors that I talked about on my channel before, going from pet to threat in a toxic workplace, basically being brought in, being love bombed, being sought out, right? Being put on projects, being pushed to the front. And then once you start to showcase your abilities and your skill sets, now people are intimidated by you for the very same skill set that you were brought in to demonstrate. And that confusion leaves a lot of us to think that it's something that we did, to go inward. Feelings of depression, anxiety manifest, when really it's the person who's harming us, who is insecure and taking it out on us. It has nothing to do with us. That's so real. Pet to threat within the context of the US as Black people. How does that show up? Yeah, absolutely. Leslie says it steals from us the chance to get a good footing. So it feels like leaves in the wind. Woo! 100%. 100%. It feels like leaves in the wind. And that kind of emphasizes my point about memory too, right? When you don't have a chance to get a footing in what has happened and who you are and who you come from, you kind of feel like you're, and often we're in survival mode too because of the confines of capitalism. Right? And capitalism, enslavement are literally hand in hand. That's real. That's real. Soul Inspire says Black women have been conditioned to be the workhorses of the world, our mothers, grandmothers, great grandmothers, and so on. Yeah. 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 Thank you for that. Yeah. And it's through understanding that, recognizing when people are trying to put us into that role and realizing that we have agency. No, I'm not going to be your workhorse. That's powerful because people do not want us to recognize when we're being used as workhorses. Because something within us says, hold on, that's not right. Once you have the awareness of that, then I'm actually a human being who can't take on 3 or 4 jobs at one time. That I actually need to rest and recuperate and recover. I'm human. Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you, Jason. Hey, Maya. Good to see you. Hey, Marissa and everyone, wishing you rest this evening. Thank you. And same to you. It's good to see you. Yes. Yeah. Akina says this cycle is the average experience for us as Black women in any job workplace. I can't tell you how many times I've experienced this. It's no wonder I need a break. Yeah. I'm sorry. Ooh, yeah. 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 Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I so agree. Leslin says we do try though, and they were literally killing us. Yeah. 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 So that's an impact of colonial servitude. Your body will start to break down. If you are constantly in service to the colonizer, to the oppressor, to someone that you have placed above you because you have been socialized to do so, now you're ignoring your body. What your body needs, your need for rest, for recovery, because you're only concerned, you have been conditioned to view what they need you to do as above even your own basic needs. So your body starts to break down. Your mental health starts to be impacted. Because again, we weren't put here to be servants. But that's how we're socialized so often. And our bodies feel the impact of that because our bodies know we weren't put here to be servants. We're put here to be human beings in need of rest, in need of times where we don't do things, not able to work 2, 3, 4 jobs at one time. But because the confines of this system that we live in, under colonization, under enslavement, under capitalism, we're socialized to push our bodies past the point of exhaustion, of the warning signs, the red flags, telling us that we can't go any longer. We can't do this anymore. And what happens when your voice has been silenced? Now you don't even believe in your ability to speak up when you do need rest. Now you don't even trust yourself in that. So a lot of us will work even harder because we've been socialized to ignore, to doubt those things that pop up in us naturally. Those voices that we Like the messages that we hear, those are sacred. And I think the more that we can bring our awareness to the fact that those are sacred, those are telling us that something's not right. And we do have the power to lean into that. That's where our power lies. Yeah, Legend said I was not placed here to be a servant, but to be in service of my fellow man. Coined by me. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I was not placed here to be a servant, but to be in service of my fellow man. Yeah. Yeah. We weren't put here to be servants. That is not why, again, somehow I made this journey to earth to be a servant. That doesn't ring true to me. Why do I have free will if I was put here to be a servant? I wouldn't have free will then. I wouldn't have the thing within me saying no to things I know are not right. I wouldn't have that if I was put here to be a servant. That wouldn't even exist. So the fact that you have an inner knowing, that thing within you that says this is not right, that lets you know that you are powerful. You have free will. You have the ability to speak up when you see things are not right, to advocate for yourself and other people that you see being harmed. That is where your power lies. Oh, thank you. Jason says, boom, you better say it. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Soul Inspire says, the thought of going back to that part of the system brings stress to my body. And the next day I feel it in my lower back. Yeah. It shows up almost immediately. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Being in rigid, structured environments and having it show up in different parts of my body, in toxic environments. Our bodies know. Our bodies know, and our minds often catch up later if we even get to that point. But our bodies know when we're being harmed. Our bodies know when we are operating in colonial servitude. Again, placing other people that we have put above us in a higher position, thinking that their needs are more essential than ours. Our bodies tell us, you got to slow down. This is not how you should be operating. This is not how your body was created to operate. And it's telling us that through the various ways, like pains and stuff that you mentioned, that show up. I experienced that too. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, y'all. Another thing that I wanted to mention, the cycle of victimization. So this is when we basically oppress each other to try to get some power back. Being in systems of oppression, it taking our power, our agency away from us at every turn, we will often turn inward to each other to try to get some of that power back. This is a cycle of victimization, carrying out the same tactics of colonization, of enslavement on each other, because this is what we've seen being modeled as a way to gain power. Because we often view the stakes as lower when we mistreat, when we harm each other, versus putting it back on the people who are harming us, calling them to the carpet. The stakes are too high. Because again, that messaging has been reinforced with violence over time. So we will turn inward and enact these same tactics on each other. And how does that further impact, right, development? When we think about the parent-child relationship, how does that impact brain development, and how does that create a new cycle of generational trauma? Us enacting the abuse that we witness, that we see, that we're exposed to, enacting that out on each other. Another way that colonization continues to persist. And it's not just a one-time act of colonizing. It's over time. It's over generations. It is an active thing that is still ongoing. And we see it playing out in interpersonal relationships day after day. So yeah. So how I'm healing from colonial servitude, helping Black women get free. Again, I am offering one-on-one healing and liberation coaching sessions, which I will link in the chat, and it's also scrolling on the screen. Again, as a master level social worker, bringing my skill set into a space where I have seen the effects of toxic environments over and over again. Having the privilege and opportunity to work closely with Dr. Kamani and hearing stories of Black women toxic job survivors, realizing my own wounds of colonial servitude and how those showed up in the toxic job that I was in. So that's one of the ways that I'm healing. Also, leaning into my anger about things that should make me angry. Not trying to be nice, but being real about how I've been harmed. We're often socialized, especially being socialized as women, to be nice. That is where our sense of safety comes from, in quotes. Being nice, being agreeable, unlearning that and realizing that I can be real. Right? And that kind of goes back. I have a video on my channel about freeing ourselves from the male gaze. The power in that. If I'm no longer worried about how this man is viewing me or this person who is upholding patriarchy, because they always don't have to be a man, is viewing me, how can I free myself in that? Now I'm just worried about showing up authentically to me. That's a way to reclaim your power. Other ways I'm healing, speaking up, speaking out through platforms like this. And thank y'all again so much for supporting me. I just reached 2,000 subscribers on my channel, and I greatly appreciate y'all again liking, sharing, commenting on my videos. It has been tremendously healing for me to read your experiences. So thank you, because y'all don't have to be watching me, so I appreciate it. I appreciate y'all being here. Yes. And that is how you can book a one-on-one session with me if you are interested in healing and being liberated, reclaiming your self-confidence from toxic environments. Yes. Thank you, JSim7. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Ways I'm healing from colonial servitude, learning how societies function before colonization. A lot of us are very limited in our scope of understanding how the world works, only thinking about post-colonization, which happened like in the context of the US, right? Starting in the 1600s. Realizing there were times before that. And that also helps to envision the future. I know something better exists because something better existed before. So I know that something better can be created. That is my proof. We can look to history as proof for what can exist in the future. Telling the stories of my predecessors. Again, going back to history. Learning from people who came before me. Reading their work. Soaking up their knowledge and understanding of the world to let me know where I am in my position in society today, as I am unlearning colonial servitude. Reclaiming my power, rebuilding my self-confidence, understanding that I have agency and free will in everything that I do. And speaking of anger, Alicia Renese has a wonderful video on her channel, A Black Woman's Guide to Anger. That is just phenomenal. I will link her channel in the description, or actually the chat right now, but yes. If you are someone who also struggles with owning your anger, sitting with it, recognizing it, if it still feels foreign, because I know that was the case for me, being angry feels kind of weird sometimes. If you've never allowed yourself to go to that place, it might take some time to really recognize the things that make you angry. But that is one of the ways that you can heal, right? From this messaging that we have to be okay with being harmed, mistreated, disregarded, overlooked. Tapping back into your anger can be a huge source of healing when it comes to that. Reconnecting with nature. In Unlearning Colonial Servitude, again, one of the aspects of colonization is destroying the land, is taking over indigenous lands, taking over control. And the land remembers. So the more that you can reconnect with nature, the answers are there. The answers that you may be seeking. And a lot of us are taught to fear nature because of the things that occurred in nature when we think about enslavement and how that has impacted our relationship with the earth on purpose. All of this is very deliberate action to sever our ties to greater understanding and knowledge through fear. Through fear. Unlearning messages of white supremacy, competition, scarcity, urgency. Really reflecting on the places that those show up in my life and intentionally taking those out little by little. It's a process over time. But the more that you are aware of how these teachings that you did not agree to take on, how they're showing up in your life, you have the agency to slowly remove those and say, I'm not carrying those out. Those are not aligned with my values. Megan Webster Tatum, hello, one-on-one price, please. That is listed on the landing page. If you go to the link there to book a session with me, the price and the information and the ways to book is listed on the landing page. So yes. And here's the link again, y'all. So yes, I think that's all of my notes. I want to thank y'all so much for being here. Again, for supporting my channel, for commenting, for being brave enough to share your experiences so that we can learn from each other in community as we're processing what a lot of us are recognizing, how we got to this place and how we can go to somewhere different. That requires us tapping back into our inherent power, agency, and free will, and recognizing that our voices have always been powerful. That is why there are so many efforts to silence them. If our voices weren't powerful, people wouldn't try to quiet what we're doing. They wouldn't try to break our self-confidence, break our self-esteem in a lot of these toxic environments. But because we are so powerful, and that is a threat to the status quo, to the system of oppression, of colonization, that is where we receive a lot of the messaging that we're not powerful. Because we are powerful. We're that powerful. So on that note, Leslin says, I'm so happy that I caught this live because the conversation is so very important. Thank you, Leslin. Yes, I'm happy you're here. And thank y'all so much for sharing everything that you shared in the chat. Again, for being here. I don't take that for granted. I don't take that lightly. And yeah, as you're on your own journey of unlearning colonial servitude, I hope that you will continue to share your process, things that you are doing to tap back into your power, because the knowledge that we can share with each other is really like the source of change and continued sustained transformation, because we know that we weren't meant to live like this. And again, we know that better can exist because better has existed before. That is our proof. All right, y'all. On that note, thank y'all for being here and hope you have a good night. Until next time, bye, y'all.